Hi team, it's Dom, and I'm back to cover Auckland Powerlifting Champs. And for part two, I'm covering our women's team's performance at Auckland Powerlifting Champs. So for our women's team that competed at Auckland Champs, basically anywhere between 0 to 3 competitions for most of them. So because of that, a lot of the goals would be primarily developmental goals, gaining experience in competition, learning the flow of competition, uh, quality of standard of and officiated lifts, limited attempts, exposure to perhaps moderate percentage lifts, so a lot of developmental goals, but also with local meets. I just kind of want to quickly mention that for Auckland Champs, a lot of the times, like you're met with people that are actually the same level of competition as you. So you get to actually experience competition. So that's pretty evident here for our first lifter that I wanted to cover, which is Julia. So Julia here, basically I've been working for her for a little bit over a year. She's actually come from local GPC federation, so untested, mainly because that's kind of like the community that she was brought up in through the powerlifting, through powerlifting. But she decided to make a switch to coaching for me a little bit over a year now. Um, and started to switch to the IPF or the NZPF. So tested powerlifting here. Because of that, normally if you're like a drug-free powerlifter and you're competing the untested for whatever reason, you don't really get to experience a lot of competition. You don't get a lot of exposure to competition. But once she switched over, especially for these local meets, she actually gets to experience that, and that's pretty evident in this competition here. So she's actually at least on paper, initially, she was in a tight battle for first place at the 57 Opens. Now, obviously, like a lot of our premier Opens in New Zealand, won't necessarily always take these local meets. Um, and that's kind of what happened here, and just kind of opened up the door for us to compete with other lifters of our level for like placings position in this situation, the gold medal. um, so for her competition best was actually 110, and we decided to open on that. You see her not lifting on knee sleeves as well, and just lifting on belt. That's one of the changes that we've made as well, is basically training a little bit more with belt, because she just tends to not train with belt, but then competes in belt. So train a little bit more in belt for those heavy exposures, and you can see it kind of pay off here. She was really looking forward to, like, well, one of our main goals is just like to PB the squat, and we ended up needing to PB the squat by a pretty good margin for competitive purposes here. So 120 is our biggest squat in the prep, and she's able to hit that here on her third attempt. It looked a little bit slow here on video, but in truth, like, her squats kind of look like that for the most part, but the position is always maintained, so she can kind of always grind that through. And that was always going to be, I would say, like a high percentage lift. I really didn't see her missing 120. Um, Granted, like how well she moved it in training, and obviously there as well, she didn't miss it. So 3 for 3 out of the squat. Her main competitor, again, like on paper initially, it was quite close, but I believe she missed her third squat after taking like a smaller jump. So um, kind of starting to open up the door for us. Now, Julia, I think on paper as well, even though it's close, I think she would have she'd have the advantage for the most part. So a lot of the lifts that were taken, even for the thirds, are high percentage lifts, right? So even for the bench press here, a little bit under her PB for the third attempt. So didn't even try to go for a PB for the third attempt. Julia trains at a commercial gym. She basically doesn't have access always to competition spec equipment. So that's actually an understatement. She never has access to competition spec equipment. So basically, sometimes like from a position standpoint, from a bench height standpoint, it's really hard to replicate uh, competition standards, right? In terms of like the height of the bench. So um, can sometimes look pretty sketchy in terms of like the hip position in training, but in competition, so this is like our second competition working together in person. In competition, she actually tends to execute pretty well, at least the last two competition on the bench press. So this one's not very different. Like, again, not really going for PRs here on the bench, playing it pretty conservatively, and makes 75 here. So again, like her competitor missed her third attempt bench, and that just kind of puts us like quite ahead now. So you can see here, like I said, like even even at the local level, um, a lot of the lifters get to experience competition, right? And then just because you're trying to focus on yourself, because that's what I asked her, how competitive you are, and it's mainly focusing on herself, right? And her own development. Just because you focus on yourself and your own development doesn't mean you don't necessarily want to experience competition as well. And that's kind of like you can have it both ways. And in this situation for us, um, per, development for her meant winning the competition, right? So uh, kind of had to put her, yes, in positions to PR, but also in position to like make decision, calculated risk, instead of just going for those PRs. Um, so again, 10 kilo PR on the squat, pretty conservative on the bench. And then for the deadlifts, her second attempt, 145, was already a PB there. And I think from there, 145 pretty much put the competition out of reach for her main competitor. And that's 8 for 8 going into the final deadlift now for Julia. So, uh, having gone 8 for 8 already, and then pretty much securing the competition win for her, she gets to play around with like a personal goal, right? Like, so hey, you've done your job, you've won the contest, you go for a personal goal, which is 150 here. And as you can see, pretty tough there towards the end. Popped it off the ground. Lockout's pretty tough, but gets it. You know, that would be, I would consider that. I wouldn't consider that as a low percentage lift. I'd consider that as a moderate, percentage lift that she'd earned. She'd earned that attempt. She'd won the competition. She's done her job, um, and she earned the right essentially to go for a personal number, a good number for her. Next up here we have Chanel. She's competing in the Masters 76 kilo class. She's from a CrossFit background. She's done CrossFit comps before, but this is her first powerlifting competition. So here for her, a lot of it's like, again, like going through rules, learning the standard of lifting. Um, Her standards been pretty good anyways, even in training. But there's certain things like calls sometimes can be longer than what you'd expect. If you were, let's say, for the squat, you'd unrack and then a little bit longer squat command, that kind of stuff. So these are the things that are just trying to warm her up. Well, like just psychologically, listening to the calls, but also letting the adrenaline kick in. You can see that they're pretty much smoked her second attempt at 155. So she's in the Masters 1 at 76 class, but a light 76, around about 72, 73 kilos there. So got room to fill out, or whatever she decides in terms of weight class for her. Um, yeah, pretty much smokes 155. I think she pretty much sweeps the Auckland records as well. So local records as well. So a lot of these people, even though they're in their first meet, they could also still go for Auckland records and local meet records. And although it might not be meaningful to other people, a lot of like more experienced lifters like kind of poo-poo local like records, or local age group records. Like these can be quite meaningful for a lot of people. So that's no different here for Chanel. And the other cool thing about local records is we get to take chip attempts. So what that means is she goes 65 and then 70, and because this is an Auckland record for bench press, we get to go 73. So you don't have to go to that with that 2.5 kilo increment. You can go with smaller increments here. And we take full advantage of that. You know, like if it's a record, we can be a lot more accurate with our attempt selection, instead of just like kind of being fixed to the 2.5 kilo jump. So 73 here. She smokes it anyways. A little bit of bubble on the chest. She gets, in my opinion, on this video now watching it, a little bit of a quick press command, given the bubble on her chest, but I don't think she would have missed it anyways. Um, after the um, after the bench here, uh, pretty much like adrenaline's kicked in. She's fully comfortable, enjoying herself, enjoying lifting. Now she just goes right, like hits her opener deadlifts. She's in the contest. She secured some of those records. Now she just like pretty much lifts, just gets full effort, right? And from here on out, I'm just throwing numbers at her. Um, in training, the best deadlift she hit in the prep was 177 and a half. Oh no, 177. So for her second attempt, I got her 174. Again, Auckland record. But here she's just like sweeping the records for each individual lift and total as well. You'll see her smoke 174 here. Um, yeah, a little bit of a stick point at the top, but really nothing really to worry about. Um, 185 was her final attempt here. Um, you know, hitting 177 maybe 2-3 weeks out before comp probably suggests that 185 would be like a pretty moderate attempt. Um, but honestly, she makes it look like a high percentage attempt here. Um, yeah, like pretty much smokes it, not that much slower than her second attempt. Probably good for like maybe 192, 195 if I really asked her to. Um, so yeah, Chanel, first comp, pretty good PRs, PBs, whatever you call it, across the board there. So that's great for her. Great experience for her. Um, the next person here, we got Isobell. I didn't get her squats and didn't pretty much didn't uh, do that well in squats. If we're being honest, Isobell knows that she's not. We've discussed it. She's not very happy with the squats, and obviously also the deadlift. A few weeks before, she suffered a tweak on her back and pretty much like got through the squats okay, but it kind of flared up the back a little bit, and deadlifts was also a little bit of a write-off, pretty much a token, but something that was going really well for us in prep and in comp too is the bench press. Um, so for the comp 2.5 kilo PR, on the bench press, that 65 moved like a bit sticky off the chest, and you know, ideally like I would have liked to take in 70, but kind of didn't earn the 70 kilo attempt from 65, but always knew that 67 would go just from like how training's been going for her. Yeah, so wasn't worried about 67 even though, or 67 and a half, even though that 65 moved a bit sticky. This is still like for all intents and purposes like a high percentage lift given like the training data. Um, and basically like how she moves the 67 and a half suggests that she probably had 70, that second attempt was probably just like a little bit of a misgroove or misexecution on her behalf there. Um, yeah, so you see her here just taking like a pretty much like a token deadlift. Her PB on deadlift, I believe, is 127. So this is 105. As soon as the warm up started, it wasn't looking great. She wasn't feeling great. And I was just like, oh well, we'll just get this one lift and then we'll get out of here. The other side of the local comps, um, basically is sometimes you're pretty much left alone in your weight class and your age category, and that's kind of what happened here with Isobell. Pretty empty for her weight class, so we just wanted to secure a total without kind of aggravating the back anymore, and that's kind of what we did. Next one here, we have Tilly. Um, so Tilly is our sub junior lifter, 76. So Tilly's been lifting for a little bit over a year, but last year she competed twice. And her last comp was Auckland Champs last year, and then she suffered a pretty bad back injury. A pretty tough lesson to learn for a sub junior um, lifter. Like pretty debilitating back injury, but she it's a very very long story. Lots of ups and downs, but she fought through. She really wanted to make it back on the platform, and she did all the hard work. She dotted the i's and crossed the t's and managed to get back on the platform. Um, that was not her opener, so we didn't get to video her opener. That's her second attempt at 117. That looked super duper tough for a second attempt. We just jumped 2.5, missed it anyways, but the way that 117.5 looked, um, basically that was probably it for her for the day anyways. That 17.5 is a 7.5 kilo PB. So again, like having competed earlier on last year, suffering back injury, rehabbing, doing all the work it takes to get back on the platform. As soon as she gets back on the platform, um, PB immediately, right? So that's great for her. Good feels for her. Build some confidence for the rest of the competition. Again, like having not competed for a long time. The one thing that went well for her throughout last year is obviously she was still able to bench. And here we are opening at 177. Sorry, not 177. One day, Tilly, one day. At 77 kilos, which is, I believe, 5 kilos over the New Zealand record for sub junior 76 already. So, as you can see, like if we're kind of just left alone to be able to train properly, like we can make some pretty significant gains. And that's kind of what happened with bench. Like she was able to train it. She was able to do all the hard work and train as hard as she can for bench, and opens on the New Zealand record, 5 kilos above a New Zealand record. And from here, because every attempt is a record, again, we can jump, like up to half kilo increments. So we go 77, we go 80, so 3 kilo jump. We can take that. It's all a record. A little bit of a long start command there, but as she would say it, she ate that. She taught me that that's like a good thing. Like if you eat it, I don't know what that means. Zoomers, man. Anyways, that's 80, and then look, like with the way things are moving, she's probably good for a lot more. But I was like, okay, we'll just go 81.5. The biggest she's benched in the gym for prep was 81. And sometimes it just kind of goes like it's fast, and then just like a hard stick point. But yeah, this will be her third attempt, again, like well above the New Zealand record. Um, Here again, something that she's super duper confident in bench press, obviously because she is able to train, she is able to prep, she's able to do the hard work. It's really really easy to be confident in a lift, and that's kind of what it looked like here. 81 and a half, a little bit slower than before, but really not much of a stick point there. She ate that. I think that's how you say it. Yeah, she'll tell me. So yeah, 81.5. So deadlifts is what pretty much caused the back injury this time around about this time last year. But this time last year, she won the best overall sub junior in Auckland Champs with a 130 deadlift. And you see her there pretty much smoking her 135 opener. So even though she suffered a back injury and worked through rehab all the way throughout last year, working through the core in isolation, For recovery purposes, we still worked around it, and we still managed to strengthen a lot of the other components of the lift um, on the meantime. So when we were ready to go back and pretty much lift, she starts smoking, like well above her PB. So 130 old PB, that's 145 that she just hit for her second attempt. So yeah, pretty much something that was a cause of the injury became pretty quickly a strength for her. So this is 155. This is 35 kilos. Sorry, 25 kilos over her personal best last year. This time last year, and again after a pretty debilitating back injury, can't be much happier than that. Obviously first place sub junior and best overall sub junior honors for Tilly there. Um, Next one here, I have Madeleine. This is our first competition together. I believe only a couple of training blocks since she started working with me. She's up a weight class, so I'm not worried too much about that. But for Madeline, a lot of it is just like kind of me getting the feel of like her nerves and how she competes and how she executes on game day, and also from her end, getting a feel of how I call attempts. So 115 opener, 122 and a half a second attempt, and 127 and a half here, third attempt. Um, that's a 15 kilo PR for her. Got my notes here. 15 kilo PR for her. So pretty good outcome there. So again, just like trying to get a feel for like how she competes there. So wasn't really looking at taking any big risks. A lot of high percentage lifts for her here. Even her opener there, 57 and a half. Um, and then pretty much 62 and a half. Sorry, that last one was to be 62 and a half. And then this one's 67 and a half. I just saw the plates. Um, Basically, she goes 5 kilo jumps on her bench press, which she's never done before, but was able to like pretty much execute pretty well there. Unfortunately, I don't have a video of her deadlifts. That went well for her as well. 147 and then 160 for her second, and then 170 for her third. So for Madeline, she goes 15 kilo PB on squats. Think 10 kilo PB on bench press, and then 10 kilo PB on deadlifts there. So pretty big PB there on the total on top. So again, pretty new working with Madeleine. Didn't take any risks for attempts there. And she executed what's in front of her. Pretty high percentage lifts, and she made all the high percentage lifts. And yeah, had a good day in competition for Auckland champs there for our first competition together. So that concludes the women's team for Auckland champs. As for part two, part three will be the men's team. But before I actually let you guys go, I want to give a shout out to some of the new up and coming clubs in Auckland. I forgot to give them a shout out on the juniors video, which I should have there, but here as well. Basically, one of the things, if you've been in the sport long enough as a powerlifting coach, one of the things that was a bit of a struggle, at least locally, is to find appropriate level competition, right? Like you have your guys that are exceptional and just kind of like way far in ahead, and then you have a lot of new people lifting within the same local meet in the past, right? But now, my experience with Auckland Champs is that there's a lot of these new clubs that are taking on a lot of novice powerlifters, and then trying to transition them to intermediate powerlifters. And then you get like a pretty good local scene in terms of competition, right? Like, for example, like with the junior boys, they get to compete quite closely with people within their level. Here we had Julia compete quite closely with someone around her level, right? It's not just like one big outlier total and then the rest of the pack. Right now, we're experiencing growth in Auckland powerlifting that means that like a lot of our local lifters get to experience proper competition, competing against someone within 10 5 kilo total of yourself, right? So just want to give a shout out to those clubs. um, I just want to give a shout out to the clubs that aren't necessarily your most established clubs. So I'm not gonna necessarily mention all the clubs, but the clubs that I did um, I did notice in particular uh, here in Auckland, at least. And so obviously, I'm gonna shout out my guy first, Jordan, Apex Performance. He's been coaching for a long time now locally, so like around 3+ years now locally. He's got his crew. I think he's got a big crew coming up for the WCPA championships this weekend. He's got a pretty good group over there. So Apex, I want to shout out Sage Powerlifting. I believe that's Rafi, who is the 93 junior champion here in Auckland. So he coaches a good handful of guys. Of course, I'm going to shout out Raynon, who's the coach for Ironclad Powerlifting. I'm not going to get any of these club names wrong because I want to make sure that give them proper credit. Ironclad, he's got a really good group of juniors as well, and he's coaching. Again, like a lot of juniors that you get to compete against at this level, appropriate level of competition, right? Like for other more established coaches, more established clubs, they still get to provide that experience for their novice and novice lifters trying to transition into intermediate lifters. So shout out to Raynon, Ironclad Powerlifting, um, and '09 Barbell, Marius from '09 Barbell. He does a lot of coaching locally as well. I think he's been coaching like maybe 2 to 3 years now. So he has a lot of people that he coaches as well. And again, glad to compete against them, or my guys to have the opportunity to compete against them and experience competition. I want to say Michelle as well. Shout out to Michelle from Inner U. Michelle, although she is primarily based in Waikato Bay of Plenty, um, she also coaches a lot of, well, not a lot, but she also brought out, I think, two girls or women for Auckland Champs. So shout out to her as well. Like she seems to be good, doing a lot of good stuff for her community there. And another club, I believe, Javan, who's like an old school, not old school, but like not an old powerlifter, but like someone who's been in Auckland powerlifting for a little while now. Shout out to Javan from Anointed Strength, I believe is his club. So he coaches a lot of guys. I believe a lot of them train out of Nesian Fitness, the gym in South Auckland. And shout out to Javon as well. So Javon's been around for a while, coaching a lot of his guys. So I believe like a lot of my open heavier guys competed a lot of against a lot of his guys. So shout out to them as well. So a lot of um, new up and coming clubs that are putting forward, like developing a lot of novice lifters into intermediate lifters. So yeah, it's really great scene at the moment. Great opportunity to compete for a lot of my guys. So really appreciate the opportunity to compete against everyone, and really appreciate all the other clubs that are um, giving a lot of my guys the opportunity to experience competition.